Hello students, today we're going to be talking about central idea. Specifically, what is the central idea of a nonfiction text? How can I find the central idea in a nonfiction text? And how can I answer test questions about a text's central idea? So to start things off, what is the central idea of a nonfiction text? The central idea is just the main point a nonfiction text is making. The central idea summarizes the text down to a single statement that encompasses the most important details about the text. So it's basically just a one-sentence summary of the main point of the text. The central idea is very similar to a theme that we would read about in fiction, for example, since both talk about the central message of the text. The main difference between theme and nonfiction central idea is that a theme is usually going to be a life lesson, while a central idea in nonfiction doesn't necessarily need to be a life lesson. Sometimes if you're reading like a speech or something, the main point or the central idea actually might be a life lesson, but sometimes you might be just reading about squirrels or something, in which case it's not really a life lesson that you're learning about. So as some examples, first example here, let's say that we read a text and this is what we just came up with as the main point. People should strive for equality and justice. This could be a theme, so it might be in a fiction text and we might say that that's a theme. But in a nonfiction text, that also could be the central idea. So see that one statement can be both, depending on what text we're reading. But then we get to this one, the issues of slavery and state rights instigated the Civil War. That is actually not really a life lesson so much as just a fact. So that actually wouldn't be a theme. However, it would be a central idea if that's what the text that we read is actually talking about. Alright, so we just looked at what the central idea of a nonfiction text is and how it's kind of related and similar to theme. But how do you actually find the central idea in a nonfiction text? Well, there is a few steps that you can take to basically figure out what the main idea is for a nonfiction text. First of all, you want to summarize each section or paragraph and just kind of maybe make a sentence or just a word or something about each paragraph that you read, just to say what is that paragraph really talking about. After you do that, step 2 is to see what points seem to be most strongly supported with evidence. So you want to see which ones seem repeated quite a bit. So if there's a point that kind of keeps being made in different ways, you definitely want to make note of those, as they're probably more important points if they're backed with even more evidence and more time spent on them. Then you want to, optionally, you want to summarize the whole text in a paragraph. You don't necessarily need to do this if you feel like you can skip it, but if you're feeling a little confused about the text or something, this might help you to clear your thoughts and everything. So just writing it down in one paragraph, summarizing what the text is about, might help you a bit. And then the last step would be to generalize or summarize the most important points into a single statement about what the central idea of the text is. So you are going to, lastly, try to put all of those summaries and all of those main ideas into one single statement, which can be rather difficult, so usually you're going to have to generalize a little bit to basically make it work, but that generalized statement is going to be your main idea. So lastly, how do you answer test questions about a text's central idea? Well, first of all, like we just went through, you want to probably, while you're reading, go through those 4 steps for finding a central idea. So specifically, just to name them again, you want to summarize each section or paragraph, what it is actually about. It doesn't have to be long, but maybe just a word or phrase about each paragraph or section. Then of those, you want to see what points seem to be most strongly supported with evidence. So as you're kind of summarizing, you're going to see that more paragraphs might be pointing towards specific points that the author is making. So you want to kind of make note of which points seem to be most strongly supported with evidence. Then you want to summarize the whole text in a paragraph, if you're still feeling a little confused anyway, just to kind of collect your thoughts and try to summarize what the main point is about. And then when you are ready, you want to basically make the summary into a single statement about what the central idea of the text really is about. And again, you probably will have to generalize a little bit to be able to fit all the details, all the most important details, but that is kind of the end goal there. So after you've done those 4 steps, again, you probably want to do those while you're reading. Then you want to go ahead and look at the question itself and pay attention to how the question and answers are actually worded. So you want to specifically make sure that you know what is the question really asking and what is each of the answers really saying, because you want to pick the one answer that obviously is answering the question best. And lastly there, you want to pick the answer with the most evidence-backed important details from the passages. One kind of tricky thing is that you might run into an answer choice that maybe seems to say part of what the text is about, but not the whole text. If it's only talking about really part of the text, it's probably the wrong answer, so you want to avoid that. The main point and the central idea is going to be talking about the main point and not just a part of the text, so you want to pay attention for that. Anyway, that is how you would answer test questions about a text central idea. So finally, we're going to go ahead and look at an example test question to kind of try this out a little bit. So here's the question. Which of the following statements best captures the main idea of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech? So the first part for answering the question, of course, is before we even get to the question, you should have been going through those kind of 4 methods that you want to do before you even go to the questions, which is specifically while you're reading this speech, you want to be summarizing each of the sections or paragraphs in just a word or a little phrase on what it's about, and you want to be kind of making note of which of those summaries, which of those points seem to be emphasized the most, where's there the most evidence pointing towards specific points that the author's making. So you want to do all that while you're actually reading the text, making little notes and whatnot. Then you could, of course, summarize the text in a paragraph and then try to get it down to your own one-sentence summary or central idea of what the speech is about. Then you can come to this question and read this. And next part of that would be to know what exactly the question is actually asking. It's basically just asking for a generic main idea. So then we check the answers for what the answers are really saying, and we're going to try to pick the one that has the most evidence and is encompassing the main ideas from the passage. So from reading the passage, you should have basically said that the main ideas were that had the most evidence. You should have been making notes and stuff. I'm seeing that there's a lot of evidence supporting that the African American community, that they have been treated unfairly and that they haven't had equality and whatnot as they should have. So that's one major point. And another major point is that there should be equality and justice for everyone, and that people should seek that. So that's all from just reading it. So then when we get down here, when we see these answer choices, we'll kind of be seeing which one best answers those 2 main ideas that we kind of see. So A, here we go. People need to be patient for justice and equality to come about eventually. It does definitely talk about patience and equality, but we're going to see, because it does, I don't know necessarily about coming about eventually, so we want to that's a good thing to note, that the way that's phrased is maybe a little tricky. So we'll go to B here. People shouldn't assume all white people are racist. This is not what the main point is about. He does actually mention that in the speech, so there is evidence for that, but it's certainly not the main point of what the speech is about. C, people should seek justice and equality for everyone since it hasn't happened yet. This was probably going to be our main answer, just because it does mention that it hasn't happened yet, so it mentions that point that African Americans have been suffering and whatnot, but it also mentions the fact that people should actively be seeking justice and equality. But just we'll also read D just in case. And D is saying life for African Americans has been hard. Again, this one does have a lot of evidence in the passage about actually supporting that, but it's actually not necessarily the main idea. It's one of the main ideas, but it's not capturing the whole thing. So I would definitely say C would be the main one, and A is just a little bit tricky with the way it's worded, but C would be our answer there, just because it's about seeking justice and equality, not just waiting around for it to happen. And it does also mention that aspect, that other main point in the passage, that African Americans actually haven't received that yet. So anyway, that is how you would actually go about answering a test question about central idea.